today's video, we're going to be talking about the book Set for Life by Scott Trench. I do have to say, I think this book definitely competes with books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad because it has a step-by-step process on how to achieve financial independence at an early age. Stick around because I'm going to share 8 different things that I learned from this book. And one of the things I really liked about it was that there was no hidden message in the book. There was nothing that you had to search for, like with many other self-help financial books where they promise that there's going to be a secret word or a secret way to get rich. This one, from the beginning to the end, the author is telling you step by step exactly what you need to do, how long it's going to take, and how it all is going to look like at the end. Okay, so now let's get into the 8 things that I learned from Set for Life. Number 1 is to make sure you're building your emergency savings with $1,000 to $2,000 in there. The reason being for this is going to allow for you to stop tapping into your credit cards or getting loans for small little fixtures that you might need to fix around the house or with your car. Anything that comes up, you will just be able to take from this emergency savings and go from there. With building your emergency savings also comes paying off the bad debt right after. And although later in the book, Scott Trench does touch on how a home purchase, it's actually not an asset, is not necessarily bad debt either. So right now, when we talk about bad debt, we're not talking about your home mortgage. And as we're working on paying down our bad debt, we're also going to be working on fixing our credit. Also, when we're talking about step 3 of this book, when we're going to be talking about how to purchase a home, you need to have good credit. And yes, there are a lot of systems out there that will allow you to purchase a home if you have bad credit. But again, if you want to tap into those lower interest rates as well as making a smaller down payment at the beginning, you're going to have to be able to back it up by showing that you have no bad debt and that you have a good credit. Number 2 was build $25,000 in savings. Yes, I had to stand back for a minute. This is a part of the book where I was like, I don't know if this is for the average Joe, only because 25,000 just seems like such an absurd number for some of us where it's like, that's impossible. But again, going back to the previous video that I made with the latte factor, this is just our mentality that we need to change. The first step is to live frugally. And so he wants us to make sure that we are fixing things around our home by ourselves and really calling in an expert when it really gets down to we can't do it ourselves. And by that time, we would have done enough research to know also how much it's going to cost so the person doesn't take advantage of us when they come in. So the 3 main areas to make sure we're living frugally is to know our cost in home cost, transportation, and food also. This is the 3 categories where Americans spend the most. So take some time to educate yourself about how much you're spending on these 3 categories and then find ways to save. Ideally, you want to spend around $1,000 to $2,000 per month and less if possible. So he talks about different ways to save money by getting roommates and by cutting down costs. He does understand that saving $10,000 to $25,000 is going to be the hardest step. And so that's why he asked that we start with the first step, which is the emergency savings. That will help us get into the mindset that we're saving money to really buy our financial freedom and then go on to those $25,000. The reason why we're saving $25,000 is because it's going to put us in a position where we can take advantage of financial opportunities that come our way, such as real estate or investing. Number 3, in order to spend money intelligently, we must have good habits and good emotional intelligence when it comes to money. We need to be able to think long-term with each of our purchases. So one of the things the author talks about is making sure that you're getting out of your comfort zone, especially when it comes to living in a certain place. And here's what I mean. Usually if you live in a place where you have to commute for a long time, you have to commute about an hour to get to work, an hour to get back home, we start to think that that's normal. Because I live in a community as such where we have to get to work and it takes us around 45 minutes to an hour. Sometimes in summer to actually get back home, it takes us around an hour to an hour and a half. And we just find this perfectly normal without really thinking of the long-term effects that it has in our spending, in our transportation segment. Not only that, but also the time we're forfeiting with our families, and also the time we're forfeiting and working in our own goals and objectives. He wants us to think about the opportunity that it will bring to move to a different city where you would be working closer to home. You could even walk or bike to work in order to be more healthy too, because he gets to a point where he talks about how people who commute are actually less healthy and more stressed than people who don't have long commutes to work. Number 4, so now we have the $25,000 saved. Now is when we get from $25,000 to $100,000. And so in this section, the author talks to us about the different ways to purchase a home. So the first two are very standard here in the United States. The first way is to buy a luxury home, the home of our dreams right off the get-go as our first property purchase. This is going to take a very big toll in our financial independence in the long term, because we're going to be stretched very thin. Number 2 is to buy a reasonable home and live in it for many years. This is also very standard. This is the home that is well within our means. We're just planning on living there. We really don't want to purchase any other real estate. We're going to be here for 10 years plus. This is very common, and it's a good strategy also. But when we get into actually generating income to help us get to that $100,000, that's when we get into the next 3. The third one would be to make sure that if you're going to purchase a home, you're going to be able to rent it in the future. Therefore, it's generating income for you. Number 4 is a live-in flip home. And so what this means is you're going to get a home that's maybe very, very cheap because it needs a lot of different fixings. You need to do maybe some construction on it, whatever it may be. So you're going to live in this house and you're going to be helping with the repairs for a few years. And then hopefully the goal at the end of it is to sell it for much more than what you bought it for, therefore pocketing the difference. The next one is what is called a house hack. And so this is where you're either going to be looking for a duplex or just a bigger home in which you can rent out the rooms. And really the technique here is to make sure that the other people living in your home, so the people you're renting out to, are covering most of your mortgage. That way you hardly have to pay anything out of pocket. A few things that you can keep in mind when you're buying your first home. A home needs to be affordable with conventional financing. You need to be willing to live in it. You need to understand if it's going to cash flow. Is it going to actually pay back in the long run? And last but not least, is this home going to have a reasonable appreciation in the future? That depends on a lot of different factors, such as the area where the home is. So that's just a little bit more of homework for us to do before we buy that home. Number 5, just a quick reminder, we are saving to buy our freedom. I know sometimes we think because we're making a good wage, we are free to do whatever it is that we please, but technically we're at the mercy of our employers. So there are people with very expensive college degrees doing the job that people with no degrees are doing. And I feel like we always wonder, why don't those people accomplish more? And it has nothing to do with their college degree, but it has everything to do with their desire to move further in life. People tend to stay in mediocre jobs for a very long time where they're not happy, they're stressed out all the time because they're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid to take a pay cut for a small period of time. And honestly, sometimes it just boils down to they're lazy. They're lazy to do the digging on what else is out there, and they're comfortable. So I feel like this book really helped me understand what financial freedom is. What we're doing by building that 25,000 of financial runway, right, is to be able to make our own decisions. If we want to leave our jobs because it's stressful and we want to take a few months off, we will be able to do that. If we want to make sure to spend some time with family, we'll be able to do that. If we want to take some time off work and actually start working on a business, now we will be able to do that. Okay, number 6 is actually a few reminders on how to invest wisely. Once you get to that $25,000, you can also start investing in the stock market. And Scott Trench walks us through a few reminders of what to do when we're investing. First off, never spend the principal. Whatever it is that you started investing with, that is your principal, that is not to be spent. Number 2, reinvest some or most of the profits in order to keep that cycle going of generating income. Number 3, to invest, one must have capital. That's where that financial runway comes in. So don't jump to this step until you have that financial runway going. Number 4, effort correlates with the return only if you're in control of the investment. Next, returns are impacted by knowledge. So make sure that in whatever it is that you're investing, you have taken the time to study and make sure that you're making the right decision, because as we know with investments, there's a lot of volatility and we want to make sure that we did our homework before just going out there and picking stocks. Next is do not confuse volatility with risk. The market is always going to be volatile, but there's a very big difference between saying the market is volatile and the market is risky. Okay, number 7 of the things I learned in this book. Categorize your day into time blocks. So this is when we're getting to the end of the book. He's talking about how to be more productive, more effective with your time. In order to do all of these steps from 1 to 3, and actually go from $0 to $100,000, it's going to take a productive person. It's going to take someone who really understands that they want to be financially free. He actually recommends that we try the method of saying what we're going to do from 8 to 12, and then from 12 to 2, and so forth. And actually the first few days documenting what we got accomplished during those time blocks, because we want to make sure that we're being effective with our time blocks. We're not just saying we're going to do something and then not getting to it. Again, nobody's keeping you accountable here. Understand that you're categorizing your time for yourself and you're keeping yourself accountable. So there's no cheating here. It's either you want to do it or not. And then number 8, he talks about a few habits to break. These are habits that are keeping you from reaching financial independence, and we got to get rid of them. The first one is to stop watching TV and Netflix for hours every day. He talks about how the average person watches around 2.8 hours of television per day. Number 2 is sports entertainment. He talks about how some people who are really into sports and really dedicated to a team spend hours upon hours per week following up on all the events and also spending money to go see some of these events. Number 3 talks about our belief in buying a luxury home as our first home. He talks about how we should break this habit. Number 4 is eating out. So we talked about packing your lunch to take to work. This is going to be a big one. Eating out definitely adds up, and if we're doing it every single day, if you add it up, I'm sure we can find an extra $50 to $300 that we lost in a single week. Next habit is social media usage. So making sure that if we're using our social media, it is for our goals and objectives. Other than that, it's just a time consumer and a distraction from our goals. Make sure that you recognize this and maybe prioritize having social media on your computer so you don't have it on your phone. That way you can't access it as easily. Number 6 is music. Listening to music all the time. He actually talks about how this distracts you from being productive. This one I have to disagree a little bit with, just because I do have some friends who, when they're doing homework or when they're focusing on something, music helps them. So again, I think it is just up to each person. He does go into some research that shows that music is very, very good at distracting you when you're trying to be creative, when you're trying to be productive. Next is nightlife. So going out and partying often, you're spending a lot of money and a lot of time not working on your goals, not working on your objectives. I think this is a given one. Next is shopping. If you're gonna shop for food, if you're gonna go shop for clothes, whatever it may be, make sure you have an intention in mind, maybe even a budget that you're working with in order to avoid overspending. Number 9 is hitting the snooze button every morning. Number 10 is getting rid of the I want to try everything mentality. He talks about how some of the younger generations, we want to make sure to go out there and explore every place on earth. We want to make sure to try every single food, whatever it may be. And not only is this a time waster, but it also leads to very shallow experiences because we're not taking the time to actually take in and experience the country that we're visiting or the activity that we're doing. Again, thank you so much for your time in watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so, and leave any questions you might have below so we can address them in a different video. I'll see you guys soon.